I'm well aware that this doesn't really have anything to do with today's video, outside of this just being another anime. But the fact of the matter is, I'm super excited about this. I've been waiting for it for a while, so I wanted to get an excuse to open it up. Don't worry, I'm not going to try to transform it here on camera. I mean, that's going to take me like an hour. This thing is insane. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good sense or overview of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. Basically, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. And today, what we're looking at is anime horror. Now, anime horror comes off of our Horror Movie Supplement, which is 100 additional subgenres to the original 100 subgenres that we looked at on the Horror Movie Syllabus. And the anime subgenre was admittedly kind of an offshoot of the horror animation subgenre that we looked at under the syllabus previously, only this time we're looking at specifically anime. And what is anime? Well, it's essentially Japanese animation. That's really where it comes from. That's where its roots are. But it has a certain style or vibe. When you say anime, people think of a certain thing, and that's basically what we're looking at today. Now, full disclosure, I am no anime expert. I'm not the biggest anime fan, if I'm being honest with you. It's hit and miss with me, and I don't have a whole lot of background or knowledge of it, but I do have enough to give you some really good movies today, which is what I'm going to do. But just full disclosure, like, I'm not the anime expert. Many of you are going to know more than I do, and I'd be happy to hear you guys share your thoughts in the comments below on other things that I'm missing or don't know, or other movies that I don't get to. But for me, my anime journey is kind of a thin one. I first probably really got into this in the 80s with Robotech, which admittedly is kind of the sanitized, Americanized version of anime because it was repackaged for an American audience. And I was a kid, and I loved Robotech, still love Robotech. And that is kind of a good entry point for anime, but it didn't really take off after that because you got to remember that back then, there's no internet, there's nothing like that. So it's not like I can just go and start finding a lot of Japanese anime stuff to watch at that time period. But when I got into college, I did get a little bit more exposed to it. I had a Japanese exchange student as a roommate, and he introduced me to a few things. The one that stands out to me the most is the show Ranma. Wild show. I actually really like that quite a bit. So bizarre. Kid turning into a panda and stuff like that. Super weird. Loved it. And then he showed me a movie that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, so I'll just wait and I'll talk about that then. And so I got into it a little bit in college, and but then I saw the pinnacle of Japanese anime in Akira. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't love Akira. I thought it was overrated. It didn't really click for me all that much. And if that's supposed to be the best of it, I think that's kind of what chilled me a little bit to getting into anime more, was because if Akira is supposed to be like the best, and I'll say now, I understand it's not the best. I get that now. And, you guys will tell me that there's other stuff that's better. But that was, kind of a chilling factor for me. And I didn't really get much more into it again. A little bit because my brother-in-law is really into anime. He likes it. So he introduced me to some things like Cowboy Bebop, and I got to see Ghost in the Shell finally, which actually was very good. I liked Ghost in the Shell quite a bit. So he had a few things that he introduced me to as well that were pretty good. But again, I never went full bore into anime. And, I dug into it a little bit more when I started planning out the supplement. And man, when it's good, it's really, really good. There's a lot to like in Japanese anime. It really is imaginative and wild, and there's no budget constraints really in terms of what they can do on screen. So you get these really crazy images and monsters and gorgeous, gorgeous animation. If you remember from the animation video, I really like animation, and I used to want to be into animation back when I was a kid and stuff like that. So I have an appreciation for really good art, and you get that a lot in these movies that we're going to talk about today. You also, however, get a tremendous amount of sexual assault. So I'm going to put this out here right now. Almost everything we're going to talk about today has sexual assault in it to some degree, varying levels to sort of mild to really, really extreme. So that's your trigger warning right off the bat. If that's something that's a particularly sensitive thing for you, maybe this isn't the video for you this week, and that's cool. I have no problem if you tap out, because like it's weird. It's weird how much like sexual assault is a thing in these movies, sometimes gratuitously, sometimes for the plot. We'll get into all of that as we get into these movies, but I just wanted to let you guys know up front that's a thing, and it's apparently a pretty prevalent thing, and we're going to be touching on it a lot in this video. So forewarned. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dig into these movies, and they're going to be in the order of, let's go in the order of like more deep cut or more obscure, or really less mainstream. They're going to get less mainstream as they go on. So we'll do that. And so let's go ahead and start exploring Japanese anime horror movies. The first anime horror movie we're looking at today, the undergraduate level selection, is Vampire Hunter D. Vampire Hunter D came out in 1985, and it's based on a series of what they call light novels, which I gather is kind of like young adult fiction novels written by Hideyuki Kikuchi. And they are apparently pretty popular as a franchise because they've spun off not only films but also video games and other media as well. So they are pretty well known, but it really starts out here with Vampire Hunter D, which made a big splash even in the US. And we're going to dig into all that in just a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie takes place in a post-apocalyptic future where a young girl has been bitten by a vampire, because vampires are just a thing at this point in the world, and she hires a vampire hunter named D to help track down this vampire that has killed her so she doesn't fully wind up turning into a vampire. The town is kind of against her and made her a pariah, and the vampire's got an obsession with her, but this mysterious new vampire hunter is interesting too, because his background might be something that is very, very interesting, as he is a Dhampir, partly them. I'm going to stop there so as not spoil the movie and the hijinks that abound in it. But this movie is pretty wild in terms of the hijinks. And that's because, like I was saying, anime has an ability to just go really crazy places because there's no budget constraints. There's nothing to prevent you from doing some really crazy, bizarre animation stuff. And this movie does that. And I think it's, kind of part and parcel of anime to have strange creatures and whatnot. But this is an early one. This is 1985. And this is worth noting, the first anime movie I ever saw. This is something my roommate showed me in college. And it was wild. I tripped out for this. I was really impressed. I really, really liked it. But yet didn't wind up sticking with the anime thing. Like I said, Akira and all that. But this movie made an impression, and not just on me. It really made an impression stateside because these movies were, kind of popular in Japan. They call them original video animation, or OVAs, which I gather is kind of like a straight to video kind of thing. So they would take like these source material, these books or these mangas or whatever, and adapt them into animation, and then release them kind of straight to video market is what the impression I get on that. And they could be a little bit more risque, a little bit more gory and sexy, and do some, push the boundaries a little bit more. And they are doing that in this movie. The story itself is fairly simplistic, It's not a terribly original or fresh idea. It's really just kind of like the style that really shines through with this. Like there is like a look to this that is very, very cool. Like the Vampire Hunter D is very cool looking design, a little ahead of his time, really. It's very kind of a 90s looking design. If you read comic books in the 90s, or even things like the Matrix and stuff like that, you can kind of see the influence this movie might have had. I'm not sure if this is where it's coming from, but it really does look good, and that's kind of the whole vibe of this movie. Is just very stylish is the word I would use for it. What's interesting is that even with this cool character design, the cool animation, the producer of the movie kind of bemoans the fact that they didn't have a lot of money. So in his mind, the animation looks very cheap. And honestly, kind of comparing it to some of the other movies that I watched, that we're talking about on this video, I kind of see what he's talking about. But honestly, in a vacuum, the movie looks good. The animation looks good. It is very much what you think of when you think of anime. It has that kind of style, that kind of energy to it that I think, you is kind of just like indicative or stereotypical of anime. In some ways, honestly, it kind of reminds me of Robotech, which came out around the same time, at least in America. And yeah, I mean, even the main girl looks like Brooke Bartley from Robotech in terms of like design and color, and she's very feisty like that and everything like that. So it's kind of a weird little synergy almost in that sense. But it endeared me to the movie when I saw it, and it really kind of feels familiar in that sense in terms of traditional anime style. Where it really shines is the very strange, weird characters and creatures. Now, in addition to vampires, you've got all these other strange creatures that are very imaginative, very odd and strange and creepy and kind of gory and like there's the weird creature in the protagonist's hand that talks to him is super weird. Love that. It's super bizarre. And the gore is way over the top. Blood everywhere, all kinds of like dismemberments and things like that, weird, crazy violence, because they can do it, because it's all animation. They don't need to worry about practical effects or anything like that. It can go bug nuts crazy when it comes to the gore, and I love it. Like I alluded to earlier in the video, there is some sexual assault type stuff here. It's fairly mild here. There's a lot of gratuitous sex and nudity type stuff here. Well, gratuitous nudity, not a lot of sex really. Like the sex is just more talked about. But there's like shower scenes with the main girl, and there's like the sexual assault scene basically amounts to like somebody trying to grab a cross off of her neck and like exposing her breasts, and like it's weirdly unnecessary. It seems like it's there to titillate, which is strange because it's animation. I don't find that terribly titillating. Maybe some people do, and I think there's a whole market for like anime porn and stuff like that. But it's in here. It's kind of strange. It feels a little out of place, but it's not a big deal. It's just kind of goofy and weird to me. Like this gratuitous shower scene is just strange to me. And it kind of ties into the romance in the movie, which is a little underbaked. It's not really sold very well. It's kind of told rather than shown. So the romance doesn't work super well in this. But honestly, I don't care about that. I don't care that the vampire lore is not super well established in this. I don't really care that the technology that they're using this isn't super well explained, because it's all about the style. It looks cool. It moves really well. It's really well paced. It's just cool looking and really fun gore and action scenes. And honestly, sometimes that's enough. Now, the critics may not agree with me because it wasn't a very beloved, critically acclaimed movie. It's kind of mid-critical reaction, but it has a good reputation going forward. Like, this movie has really kind of stood the test of time as kind of like a noteworthy anime horror film. It's kind of a standard. It's one of the earliest. I think it might be the very first anime horror movie. And it kind of still holds that reputation as being an important one, and I think well deserved. Now, I haven't seen the rest of the stuff in the franchise. I know there's a Vampire D Bloodlust. I haven't seen that. I've heard it's also quite good. Its reputation is also well, like regarded well, but it's not, it's such a broad franchise that I haven't dug into all of that. But the original is one that I hadn't seen in a long time when I watched this video, and man, it really holds up. It really is an excellent movie. So if you haven't seen that one, it's a great place to start looking into anime horror. The next anime horror movie that we're talking about today, the graduate level selection, is Wicked City. Wicked City came out in 1987, so just a couple of years after Vampire Hunter D came out, and it's very similar in terms of the kind of style and concept and stuff like that, but very different in terms of plot. And it is also based on a series of books. This time, a series of books called Wicked City, and this movie in particular is based on the first book, which is called Black Guard, which has to do with the Black Guard that's in the story. But we're going to get into that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie takes place in a universe where the human world and the demon world coexist on an uneasy truce, and the border between the two worlds is policed by this force called the Black Guard, kind of like a secret service type thing. And two Black Guard agents are tasked with protecting a dignitary who's important for a signing of a new peace treaty. Now, one of these is from the human world and one of them is from the demon world, and they have to work together to stop this assassination attempt that's trying to hurt the peace treaty. I'm going to stop there so as not to spoil the movie for you, even though the movie's a little bit strange and a little bit hard to follow, but not too hard to follow. At the end of the day, you get the idea of what's going on, but what you don't get is more exploration into the political setup that this world lives in. And I don't know that would make it better, but it is interesting. because they've set up a really interesting concept. This idea of this truce, this uneasy truce between the two worlds, and how they're, the citizens of these two worlds will kind of violate this truce in different ways, and how there are forces aimed at trying to break the peace and stop a peace treaty from being signed. It's all interesting stuff, but that's not really what the focus of the movie's on. The focus of the movie is two things. One, being cool looking, and two, crazy monster stuff. And both of those things I'm here for, frankly. Again, a large part of what I think is the appeal of anime is it looking really amazing. And this movie does that in spades. So it's got this kind of really cool cyberpunk style to this. And I'm not a cyberpunk expert, but that was the vibe I got from it. And I think when I look into the research on this, I'm not the only one. The animation is very, very awesome. Once again, it's very stylish in a different way than Vampire Hunter D. It's using color in a really fun way. It's got this kind of almost like wash out cold colors, blues and grays, and then like these splashes of red and stuff like that. These bright, vibrant colors that kind of cut through. Visually, really interesting, really cool, really works. And the whole vibe, the whole aesthetic of the city itself is kind of evoking a slight Blade Runner sense. And again, something that not only me thinking, because the criticism on this, the reviews of this talk about this a lot. It feels like Blade Runner in a number of ways, from the giant gun that our protagonist uses, to the way the city looks, to the way that these demons are kind of like trying to pass as human, not unlike the replicants in Blade Runner. So it's got a very big Blade Runner vibe to it. If you like Blade Runner, I feel like Wicked City would be up your alley on this. Now, the other part of this that's super cool are these creatures, these demons. Super imaginative, super weird, really strange, and disturbingly like scary and sexy. Like, the movie really does present like some creepy, unsettling, and legitimately scary stuff in it. There's a perverse body horror angle to this movie of watching what look like ordinary humans transform into these demonic things. That's disturbing. It's gross. It's creepy. The guys having sex with a woman and she turns into this giant vagina spider thing. I don't even know what the hell it is, man, but it was creepy. And it really does kind of dive into the body horror aspect really, really well. Now, once again, we've got a lot of sexual assault stuff to kind of deal with here. It's very explicit. Unlike Vampire Hunter D, where it was kind of mild and just like mostly nudity, here you've got full-blown explicit rape scenes. Like, and I'll be honest, it feels a little gratuitous, or at least a little unnecessary. Like, there's this whole thing about the female demon cop getting kidnapped and getting assaulted and gang raped, and it's somewhat graphic, and it's really it's unsettling, and it feels weird to put it in there as explicitly as it is. And so that's weird. Like, I had to mention it because it's just so strange. The other weird thing that's kind of off-putting about this movie is that it's very serious and got this cool aesthetic, Blade Runner aesthetic going on, a really cool cop stuff. And then there's like this comic relief character, the dignitary that they are protecting, this VIP that's got to sign the treaty. And he is like this 200-year-old little man who is just perverted. And like, he's constantly hitting on the female cop and like trying to molest her, and like trying to run off to like brothels and sex clubs and strip clubs and stuff. And like, it's played for laughs, but it's just really kind of offbeat compared to the rest of the movie. It feels a little out of place, but it really does amp up like the sex stuff in the movie. There's a lot of sexuality in this movie, a lot of sex stuff in here, there's a lot of sex scenes in here, and again, ties right into the body horror. So that's where it kind of works a little bit, is that it does have this sex stuff in it, but it winds up feeding into the body horror, creepy demon stuff. So it's a little bit more understandable in that sense, but it still does feel bizarrely gratuitous. And then when you have the actual love story thing, again, it kind of like Vampire Hunter D, feels a little thin, feels a little undercooked, not really sold super well, but it's not really the point of the movie. In fact, it also almost feels a little bit shoehorned in, even though it ties into the climax a little bit. It doesn't feel like it fits well into the movie, so that's a little bit of a clunker thing. But honestly, these things don't put me off enough to not really enjoy the movie. I really like this movie a lot. The plot is fairly easy to follow, and it moves really, really well. It's a gripping plot. It draws you in. And it's set up a complex world that I wish we did get a little bit more into, but I think it might hurt the pacing of the movie if we did. But I like the characters, except for the one pervy character, and I like the crazy imaginative monsters and gore here. It really is cool. And again, the gratuitous sex and violence stuff kind of works because the sex stuff like kind of turns into this bizarre violence and these bizarre creatures and stuff like that, which is one of the strongest points of the movie. So I kind of forgivable that it has all this weird like sexual assault stuff in there, but and maybe it doesn't need to be so gratuitous, but it does work. Overall, the movie winds up working really well, and it looks really cool. It looks really, really good. So another one that I think is not a bad entry point into the anime horror subgenre, as long as you can again roll with the sexual assault stuff. Like if you're really concerned about it, look up like a little bit about what exactly you're going to see in there, because it's pretty off-putting. But honestly, if you can get past that, it's a movie that is well worth your time. And the last anime horror that we're looking at today, the postgraduate level selection, is Belladonna of Sadness. Belladonna of Sadness came out in 1973 and is the third part of the Anime Rama trilogy, which was a trilogy of anime films that are tied together thematically. They are the concept being like highly erotic and experimental, like still painting style animation. And they're not really a narrative trilogy, more just like kind of exploring this theme, this idea, and this style, if you will. And this is the third one of that trilogy. Now, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a young peasant woman who is gang raped by the monarch of her land and his court, and her husband doesn't do anything to stop that. So she makes a deal with the devil to get power so that she can be in a place of power and lord it back over them, and it does work, and she winds up kind of changing the life for her husband and herself, but it of course raises the ire of the villagers and the people folk who kind of view her as a witch, and hijinks abound. And I'm going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie for you, but this movie is a little bit less about narrative and more about imagery and theme, and that's where it is amazing. This movie is super psychedelic looking, which I guess makes sense because it comes out in 1973, but it's very psychedelic in terms of the imagery. It really is more of a like series of still images that the camera pans over, and kind of just like paintings that are being like shown in a way that they kind of look like they're moving and stuff like that. The animation itself is kind of like mild, I guess, for lack of a way of putting it. So what you get is this like really gorgeous art, and it's like I call it like still shot animation, right? It doesn't move the way anime moves, the way you usually think of it, like Vampire Hunter D or Wicked City, and the kind of the kinetic energy of all that. It doesn't move much at all, and it really is a trip. It really is. I mean, absolutely stunning, gorgeous animation. And it's interesting because the subject matter is really heavy. Again, we're back to sexual assault once again. And in this case, that's like the premise of the movie. This woman gets gang raped and then kind of basically getting her revenge by seeking a deal with the devil. And this sexual assault is maybe the most like pretty sexual assault you've ever seen. Like this winds up being essentially an artistic rape revenge movie. And I'm here for that. And it's so bizarre because this is definitely the most artistic sexual assault you've ever seen. It's beautiful the way it's animated and displayed, and yet it's very upsetting and disturbing at the same time, right? So there's an argument to be made that this is a very tasteful way of showing sexual assault, but there's also a way of saying that it might be a little bit more disturbing or even kind of like fetishized in a way, because it's still implying some really dark, graphic, disturbing, awful, violent stuff, but it's doing it in this way that's very lyrical almost, and just gorgeous. It's really, the animation is stunning, and so it's kind of a weird way to feel, and it's kind of off-putting because you don't know how to feel about it. It's like, wow, this is a feast for my eyes, and yet it's not it's not good stuff, man. Like it's awful stuff that they're talking about there. So it's a weird dichotomy, but it just adds to the appeal of the movie for me. I think it really makes for an interesting experience watching this movie. Like the art in this movie offsets the perversity of the subject matter in a way that I think is very effective. Again, a visual treat. It's a feast for my eyes. It really is. Despite the gruesome subject matter, I'm drawn into it. My eyes are not one to look away. They're really just kind of captivated by this. It's a really trippy movie, but it's really easy to follow. There's narration that's kind of explaining what's happening and stuff like that because the animation is not necessarily super clear all the time, but it's really easy to follow, even though it's a very trippy movie. And I'm gonna admit the songs in the movie are pretty terrible. The score is fine with the songs. There's a couple songs in the movie. They are bad. They're tough to watch, but or listen to, I guess. But they are tough. But the movie itself is just an artistic masterpiece, really. Like it's really trying to not just convey these gorgeous images, but these themes, like themes about misogyny and oppression and feminism and the way that's going to look in this sense, and for better and for worse. It's really interesting in the stuff that it's trying to tackle, the subject matter it's trying to explore, and the themes that it's trying to convey. It really is ambitious, and I think it's mostly successful. Now, commercially it wasn't successful. It was a commercial failure. It did not do well. And it's easy to see why. It's a hard sell. It's basically an art house film, right? An art house film about like rape revenge. It's, not the easiest sell, but it did become a cult movie for good reason. It really did, have something interesting to say, something unique. So people found it and caught onto it, but not early enough because it's bankrupted the studio that made it. The studio Mushi Pro bankrupted because of this movie. It just destroyed it. They thought they had something good here. The creators had a good reputation, and the fact that it's critically praised now doesn't help them out. At the time, they could have used that critical acclaim then, I guess. But now people look at it and see it for its artistic merits. Now, here's the thing: like, despite the artistic merits, you can make a strong argument that it's still an exploitation movie. Like, it's still exploitative. Like, it's still dealing with exploitative sexual assault subject matter. It's still a rape revenge movie, man. It is, but it's just told so beautifully that I think that people can kind of see past that and just see the artistic merit and the value of it. I'm definitely one of those people. This movie's moving in a weird sort of way. It really kind of hits in a way that's kind of emotional, like good art does. This movie, it's kind of like unlike anything I've seen before. Like there's nothing like this that I've seen before. It's very different from the other animation movies that we're talking about today, the different animes. Like this one is unique in that sense in terms of its imagery, and it's definitely worth seeing. Again, caveat, the subject matter is pretty rough, but if you were ever going to watch a sexual assault movie and you're uncomfortable with that, this might be the one to watch because, again, it is the most beautiful version of this that I've ever seen. So those are our picks for the anime horror subgenre, but of course we've got a few extra credit movies to talk about because there were a lot of good movies to talk about, and we're going to talk about a few more of them. The first movie we're going to talk about is Paprika. Now, Paprika came out in 2006 and is based on the 1993 novel of the same name by Yasutaka Tsutsui, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but more importantly is directed by Satoshi Kon, who directed Perfect Blue, which is a movie we talked about on the channel previously, and that's why it's not on this video. Frankly, it would have been on this video for sure, but we've already talked about it, and I love that movie. It's amazing. So Paprika's got a really good pedigree here, and we're going to get into all this in just a second, but if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a dream psychologist who uses an avatar of herself named Paprika to help people in their dreams deal with certain past traumas and things like that, using this dream technology that allows people to share dreams. But this technology gets stolen by somebody who's trying to co-opt it, a dream terrorist, if you will, who's trying to use it for nefarious purposes. So Paprika and her real-life avatar need to try to solve this mystery and figure out who's doing this to basically save the world, if you will. Hijinks abound, but we're going to stop there so as to not spoil it for you. But this movie might sound a little bit familiar when I talk about things like sharing dreams and dream technology and dream terrorists and stuff like that. This might sound a little familiar to people who are Christopher Nolan fans who've seen the movie Inception, because it's very clear when you watch this movie that Inception was influenced by this. Christopher Nolan has to have been influenced by this. The idea of using machines that you connect to and you can share the dreams is right. The same thing in Inception, right? But not only just that, there are some other specific things in this movie that feel very Inception-like. There's a hallway scene where people are running a hallway. Somebody runs on the wall in the hallway. There's this concept of taking an elevator down to different dream states and seeing different levels of somebody's dreams. These are ideas that are 100% right in Inception right off the bat. There's that idea of just kind of sharing dreams and hopping in dreams. These are, like, again, it's very clear the influence is there. Not to say that the movie is ripping off, that Inception is ripping off Paprika. They're very different in terms of story, but there's a lot of concepts that are shared there. And hey, that's okay. I love Inception and I love Paprika. A large part of what makes this work for me is it's charming. Like, this movie is admittedly more sci-fi. It's not really much horror. It's really more sci-fi. But I want to talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it anyway. I don't care. But part of it is that Paprika is really charming as a character, as this avatar in the dreamland. And she's just sweet and likable, and it kind of jives with the animation style too. The animation is very fluid and moves really, really well and feels softer in a way. And I think part of that is because it's supposed to be these dream sequences, which are kind of trippy and everything. Like, they drop you right into the dream sequence stuff, and it's just kind of like this fluid, sweet style animation. Like, think a little bit more like Miyazaki rather than, like, say, Akira, right? It's less harsh and edgy and more fluid and rounded and just lilting and light. And so the nightmarish images that pop up are kind of jarring in there. And that's where the horror aspect comes in. Is like you get these jarring, horrific images, like giant creepy dolls and stuff like that, that are pretty disturbing. But overall, again, it's still more sci-fi in nature. But at the end of the day, this story isn't super important. It really is just kind of like you're meant to experience it and go on this trip with it, because the idea of this movie is it's blending the difference between reality and dream state. And as a result, as an audience member watching it, you're kind of vacillating back and forth. And you're not always sure, are you in the dream state or are you in the real state? Again, think about Inception. But like, the idea behind this, the idea of the dream psychologist and having this avatar that's used to help people with their trauma is a cool idea. And then this technology that facilitates that being co-opted and possibly being used for nefarious purposes, also really cool, driving the story, giving it some stakes, focusing on like these different like states and different like duality of reality versus dream. And in terms of the character Paprika and her real life counterpart is an interesting angle for the story, and it works really well in terms of the love aspect of the story. For once, the love story here works rather well, even though it's got a really crazy twist at the end that maybe you don't roll with it, but I thought was pretty cool. I think that the character's love in this makes sense, because you're literally talking about the girl of your dreams, but she's not a real girl. It's somebody else who's real, and that stuff's getting explored here in a way that I think is really cool. Now, once again, a little bit of sexual assault here. And in this case, it's a little bit more mild because it's a little more surreal. It's like a dream sexual assault thing. And in a way, I don't want to spoil the movie too much, but essentially it kind of works well with the plot, because it's very tame in terms of overt sexual assault, because it's not really like a rape thing happening so much as you're visually seeing somebody pull somebody out of somebody else in a way that feels a little sexualized in the way that it's drawn, the way that it's shown, but it is important for the plot and how it's happening. It makes sense for the characterization. So it really is, for me, works a little bit better there. It's fairly mild, and it really it makes sense for the plot. So I'm much more forgiving of it. But I'm also I just really like this movie a lot. I'm so forgiving about anything on it, because it's wonderful. It's a wonderful movie. I'm not the only one who thinks so. The critics really love this one. I think it has a mild commercial success. I don't know if it was a huge hit, but it really is an outstanding film. This is one I would highly recommend. Again, this is one that I think is palatable for anybody. And if you want to see good anime, and just good anime, good sci-fi anime, this is one to check out. If you're a fan of Inception, this is definitely one to check out. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. But this one, high recommend for me. I really like this one very much. And the next extra credit movie I want to talk about is Midori. Midori came out in 1992, and it's based on this series of mangas that are called Eroguru mangas. And this is basically a genre that's focused on eroticism and like sexual corruption and decadence and grotesque stuff. That's the whole concept of it. And these books are written by Shoujo Tsubaki. I'm not sure, again, if I'm pronouncing the name right. I'm probably butchering a lot of names today, but these were apparently pretty well-known books that were translated into English, or something called The Camellia Girl, and then made into animation movies and even a live action movie. But we're talking about the animated movie right now, and we're going to get into that in just a second. But first, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is a period piece set in the 1930s in the Showa era of Japan, and it follows this young flower girl whose mother dies, and so she winds up getting taken in by this like guy who runs a circus, like what's like a freak show at a circus, and she gets taken in by the circus freaks, and they are very unkind to her. They are cruel to her. They assault her. They bully her, and then one day she meets somebody who falls in love with her, who has magical powers and might be able to save her, or might make things worse. And we're going to stop there. So it's not spoil it, of course, but the movie is extremely graphic. It's like I said, erotic and grotesque, right? That's the concept behind it. And it really nails that here, because the subject of the movie is basically Midori, this child, and it's unclear how old she's supposed to be, like, but she's definitely underage. Like, it's very clear she's underage. It's not clear if she's like 16 or like 11, frankly. It's hard to tell, but she is a child, and she is repeatedly raped by people in this carnival, and just abused physically, emotionally, and it's very, very graphic. The sex and violence in this movie is extremely graphic, shown very, very, very blatantly and bluntly, and not for nothing, like, not the greatest depiction of like differently abled people in this movie, right? All the quote unquote circus freaks are very imaginative, very interesting designs, very interesting characters, but they're all by and large despicable people. There's very little to no redeeming qualities in any of them, and what you're just seeing is this young girl getting repeatedly abused and bullied. And the theme of bullying is pretty strong in the movie. It's very clear. Like, it's the excuse for showing the extreme violence and the grotesquerie and the gore and stuff like that. But it is sending a very clear message. You're not on their side. You're on Midori's side. But it's interesting to see where the story goes. And of course, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's interesting to see where it goes, and debatable whether or not that the message of anti-bullying really shines through. You can make an argument that that thread gets lost as the story goes on. At the end of the day, you can say it just gets obfuscated by all the disturbing imagery, the explicit sex and violence, the animal cruelty in this movie. There's some puppies in this movie, and some awful stuff happens to them. Now, it's animated, so it feels a lot less dark or whatever, but again, the animation knows no bounds because it has no budgetary constraints. Or, well, technically, that's not true, because this movie was actually self-financed and drawn by the creator, who was trying to get this made and couldn't find anybody to invest in it for the obvious reasons, given the subject matter, and also not for nothing, because the graphic violence and gore and stuff was amped up from the source material. Like, it's more graphic than the source material is, and that shines through, and I think that made it off-putting for people to invest in. And so he put his own money into this, right? He basically put his life savings into making this, and it kind of shows. It shows in the sense that the animation is a little less sophisticated, right? It's not a lot of movement, a lot of still images, a lot of like mildly animated things, and kind of just shown in that way. So rudimentary animation in that sense, but it still looks good. It's still a good looking movie. The animation, the drawing itself is great. Like, the art is good in this movie. It really looks great, but it's a bleak film, man. The subject matter is just so overbearing, and it's so disturbing in terms of subject matter and in terms of images, that it's tough. Now, it helps that it's short. It's only 48 minutes long, so it's fleet. You get through it a little easier because of that. But it is, it's considered a classic, probably in no small part due to how good the art is, and that there is a message trying to be sent here. But it's a tough one to watch, man. Like, I know there's a live action version of this. Apparently, I've never seen it, and I'm told that it's toned down. It's not nearly as disturbing and violent and explicit. And I'm not surprised. How could it be? Frankly, it goes in some crazy explicit and vulgar places. So this one's not for everybody, man. I'm going to tell you right now. This one is not an easy watch for people. So keep that in mind. But if you can deal with the subject matter, if you can deal with seeing it in your face, really, this one is really pretty impressive in terms of what it's doing, what it's trying to say, and the artwork. So it's definitely one that's worth the time if you can stomach it. And the last movie that I want to talk about today, the last extra credit movie, is The Empire of Corpses. The Empire of Corpses came out in 2015, and once again, it's based on a series of novels. This movie is the first novel in the series of novels called The Empire of Corpses. So it's following that same trend that we're seeing of a lot of adaptations in the anime subgenre. And they are doing a lot of interesting things with this one that I want to get into in just a second. But first, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is a 19th century period piece that's set in kind of an alternate history where animating the dead is a thing, where corpses can be made to bring brought back to life. And a young scientist named John Watson is working on this, but he's done some things illegally. Now he works for the government because he's in trouble, and he's trying to find the notes of Victor Frankenstein to figure out how he managed to give a soul to a corpse and really bring them back to life. And hijinks abound and all kinds of crazy things happen, but we're going to stop there so as to not spoil it for you. And this movie really hits for me in a lot of ways. But first, it's because of the animation. Out of everything I looked at, and I think everything that we've looked at today is gorgeous, this one is gorgeous. This one stands out to me. The animation in this is beautiful. It's very cinematic looking. The way they use lighting, and I say lighting in quotes because it's animated, right? But the way the light's shining through and hitting things, the way that the backgrounds are so rich and vivid and well realized, the kinetic energy of this movie, the way characters move, the way that the action scenes happen, the energy of this, the character designs, everything looks gorgeous. It's breathtaking. I cannot get over how good this movie looks. It's like I said, visual feast earlier for Belladonna of Sadness, and this one is a visual feast as well, but in a very different way. Whereas Belladonna of Sadness feels very experimental, this is very cinematic, very understandable. From a film language standpoint, you understand this, you see it. Camera angles, camera movements, lighting, staging, blocking, all of it makes sense from a film language standpoint. It's like you're watching a movie that happens to be animated, and it's fantastic. The second thing I really love about this movie is the concept behind it, because it's doing a little bit of like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Penny Dreadful kind of thing, where it's using literary characters as its characters and intertwining them with actual historical people and historical events, so that you get this historical feel to it that feels very rich and real and familiar, but it's telling a brand new story. And it works really, really well. Now, not for nothing, if you're a little bit of a literary person, if you're an English major, maybe like I was, sometimes the plot twists might be a little guessable because you might be familiar with the source material. And you're like, oh, this person's probably going to wind up being this because of this source material that they're from. So there is that, but it is really kind of fun and rewarding. Like, I like Penny Dreadful, I like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I like those very much. So it's fun. It's fun to kind of weave in Dr. Frankenstein and John Watson, and yeah, that John Watson, yes, and other characters that are, you know, familiar and really kind of leading you to certain expectations, and then using those to fuel the story, which again is really, really interesting because you've set up this world where these corpses can be reanimated, and it brings up all these philosophical questions of what does that mean for people, for humanity, in terms of life and death, and then in terms of war. Wars are fought very differently because they're being fought with corpses and stuff. In fact, I kind of wish they'd gone into this a little bit more, because it's pretty fascinating how it's changed our world outlook and how we value human life, because we can just reanimate people and send them off to fight for us and not lose real people. It's fascinating. The world building that they've done in this movie in terms of the corpse technology and how different people use it in different ways, and how there's different advancements and stuff like that, is fascinating. How they bring in like the brothers Karamazov and stuff like that it's wild. It's wild stuff, and I love it. But I also love that amongst all this sci-fi type stuff and these, you know, corpse stuff, like zombie type things, like horror stuff, there is a genuine pathos to these corpses that I felt. I feel the sadness of, you know, Dr. Watson trying to get his friend's soul back into his body, and I feel the sadness of the corpse and their, you know, they're basically this weird half existence that they have. It's kind of tragic. And again, it leads to these philosophical questions of like what's right and wrong, what's life and death, and, you know, ideas of God, stuff like that they don't get too into the weeds on that. They don't get too mired down with it because they're still trying to tell a fun story. But they are dealing with some really rich themes there that I find fascinating. And the movie is like over 2 hours long, and it doesn't feel that way. It's really well paced. It really flies by. But they do explore this a lot, but you still want more. And maybe I should check into the books and check into the franchise and see if there's more to it, because there is a lot to explore. They only started to scratch the surface. They're even hinting at some other things too, not just like the philosophical, like existential questions, but like there's some queer imagery here that might be a theme. It's kind of not overt, so it's hard to say if that's really there, if I'm just reading into things. But I felt like it was there, and I was here for it. I thought it was really good and done really, really well. But I like what they've done here. I like what they've done with the characters, and I like what they've done with the themes. I think that they're doing a really cool, interesting story set in the past, kind of in a steampunk style of doing it, and using these literary references to explore some interesting ideas about life and death, and science, and using science, and kind of like the Jurassic Park, just because you can doesn't mean you should kind of idea. Interesting stuff. It's interesting. This movie is not as well known as a lot of the other ones we've talked about today. It doesn't seem like it gets as much of a reputation, and that's a shame because it is excellent. Like I said, the art alone, the animation alone is worth watching for. But the story is excellent too. And if you like the literary reference type stuff like I do and the historical reference stuff, this is going to be for you. If you haven't seen this one, definitely check it out. It is an amazing movie that I feel should get more eyeballs for sure. So check it out and let me know what you think, because I'd be really interested in hearing what you guys think about this one. So that's going to do it for our exploration into anime horror. Like I said, every movie here is excellent. It's just, there's nothing but good stuff here. May not be for everybody in terms of subject matter, so think about the things before you want to watch them. Do some research if you're sensitive, but these movies, every one of them, worth your time. So let me know in the comments what you think of them. Also, let me know if there's other good stuff that I haven't talked about here. Maybe if I haven't seen it, I'll check it out, because there's a lot of rich stuff in anime horror. It's really, really great stuff, and it's definitely worth checking out. And now it's time to check out a Horror Trivial Pursuit card. As usual, I'm going to read a card live on camera, answer the question, hopefully I get it right and not embarrass myself. And since we're talking about anime, we're doing international category in the card for sure, right? So here's our question. 2016's The Wailing opens with a passage from what gospel of the Bible? I'm going to be honest with you guys, no idea. I have no clue. I have seen The Wailing. I love The Wailing. We've talked about The Wailing on the channel. It is an absolutely fantastic movie. South Korean horror film that also, like South Korean horror films do, blending in a bunch of different other subgenres, really kind of making a bouillabaisse of wonderful, like mixed genres that never feel smushed together and makes sense. It's an amazing movie that I know not everybody loves it. I thought it was more widely appreciated, but I've run into a lot of people who don't feel it, and that's okay. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But I do think it's a gem that people should check out because it's just really, really well done. I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember it opening with a Bible verse. I don't remember that at all. I have no idea. But I'm going to take a guess, because why wouldn't I? And here's the thing. We've got 4 choices, right? It's saying the gospel of the Bible, right? So the gospel of the Bible is 4 books. If you don't know anything about the Bible, there's 4 books that make up the gospel being the story of Jesus. And it's told from 4 different perspectives, 4 different people. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the 4 books of the Bible that make up the gospel. So I have got a 1 in 4 chance of being right. And I have an idea of what I'm going to guess. So if you know this answer, great, lock it in. If you don't know the answer, you're going to guess one of the 4 that I just told you, okay? And so I am going to make my guess, lock in your answer if you're making a guess too. My guess, and it is purely a guess, is the book of John. And I'm going to go with the book of John just because I feel like that's the one that gets quoted the most. If I'm thinking about other movies and stuff like that, book of John is the Gospel of John is going to be the one that gets quoted the most. So that's my guess. I'm going to look at the card, and the card says Luke. Card says Luke, so it was not John, it was Luke, and I had a 1 in 4 chance. I missed it. Did you get it right? Did you guess it right, or did you know it? Did you know it yourself? Let me know in the comments below if you knew the answer or if you just guessed and you happened to guess correctly. No shame if you just guessed. But that's going to do it for this week's video. Like I said, let me know if there's other anime horror that I should be checking out. I know that there's stuff that I didn't talk about here. There was stuff that maybe will get shown in a doctor level video, but let me know your suggestions as well, because I'm back in on anime horror, man. I'm doing this video kind of rekindled for me that this is some really great stuff here. So check it out if you haven't seen it, again, caveats being that it's tough subject matter a lot of the time. But next week, we're doing something completely different. Until then, I'm just going to say class dismissed. If I'm just being honest, I'm just super excited to open this.